Yeah, I'm a little late, but
Yeah.
I started rewatching the long video.
Okay. So how far did you go before we're starting now?
Probably roughly three quarters, maybe a little less, but I up in your Discord, the DM, I put maybe 10 or 11, things, that kind of caught my attention. I think actually the most interesting is going to be something Greg Thomas, is it Greg Thomas,
Yeah, Greg
said
Thomas.
about being a radical moderate.
Yeah, I saw that and I saw you asking what's the definition of a radical moderate?
Well, no, actually, I consider myself a radical moderate, but not, there's what he thinks is a radical moderate is different than me, but it's not that big a deal. Um, I think
So
if he's a radical
what's
moderate, well, anyway, go live. We can talk about it.
yeah,
I
we're live already.
like the term.
So what exactly is a radical moderate in your opinion?
Me, there. To me, a radical moderate is to me. I'm a big believer in moderation in all things. Any extreme can be problematic. His points about being able to see both sides or being, basically being able to think about both sides and pick out the good and the bad and maybe synthesize them. That's kind of what I think moderates are. Now, radical moderate to me means that there's a lot of progressive things that I see as more beneficial, say, to the general, humanity than say, I'm not a Hayek person. Okay, I'm not an economy guy. I don't. I think the economy or economics is a useful tool. And it's almost a different subject, though. I don't want to belabor it, but I have there's a book that I'm reading that one of someone Anand knows. He's a economics professor at Berkeley. Reading his book, and it's actually a pretty interesting book. He makes some excellent. It's an economic history book, specifically targeted at the U.S., but I think it's great.
Mm. Okay. So let's sort of delve into the topic of today. So the topic of
Okay,
today
yeah.
is deracializing the white elite. So it's sort of a review of the discussion that Glenn Lowry and John McWhorter had with Greg Thomas. So the discussion was the topic of that show was debating deracialization. So in essence, they were they were debating the concept of deracialization. What's the benefits of sort of uh, de-emphasizing the racial identity, especially as regards to Black people, right? Um, Now, so we're going to go through a few of the points that they raised during the conversation and see how we can make sense of it. I know you for this conversation, you're sort of more with Glenn. You're sort of more in the side of Glenn, and I will try as much as possible to provide a counter to that. But let it just be a free flowing conversation. So, but my first question would be, what to you is the concept of race? As in, do you believe in the concept of race, and how what is race to you if you were to
Well,
define race?
it's basically um, a socioeconomic construct. I mean, it can be phenotypical, but the way race was constructed in, say, um, the 13th century, I'm sorry, the 15th century, the first slave auction that I'm aware of was in Portugal, in Lisbon, 1444, I think it was. So differentiation of, uh, but slavery wasn't necessarily racial back then, but Africans were specifically, the slaves they put into European slave markets. Now, before that, the Slavs, everybody's had, slavery at some point in time, but it became specifically African round about 1444. The plantation economy was basically built on African slaves, and for several different reasons that I won't get into, but race has been socioeconomic. The reason there was slavery was because back then plantations were the major moneymaker. This is pre-industrial age, and your slaves would be black. Now there were indentured servants. There's history there, but eventually indentured servitude, say in pre in colonial Virginia, it didn't work out. Indentured servants didn't work out. Being able to have Africans that were phenotypically very different, um, um, wound up being how the economy, basically was built. They couldn't run away as easily. They were easily identifiable, etc. So phenotype was important. Race is socioeconomic in American history, certainly. And I could, pretty much make an argument European history after the 15th century.
Mm. So for me, from what I'm saying from this, from the points you just made, I think it was a matter of practicality that Africans were used as the slaves in
Yes,
America, in the sense
absolutely.
that they were easily
They
identifiable.
were easily to identify as slaves. Um,
Mm.
if you really think about it, even back in early American history, there were gangs in New York. There's a book that I can't remember the name of where free black people, people who black African ancestry people, could be kidnapped into slavery even if they were free. 12 Years a Slave, that's a movie, is specifically about that topic. So yeah, it was practical.
Now, so for the slave owners, for those who practiced this slavery, there was sort of a utility for them in terms of creating racial classifications, right? There was a utility for them.
Yeah.
Now that there is no more slavery, although we still have the effects of you know of the slave trade, of um, the Jim Crow and all those other racially disparate policies which predominantly affected the racialized black people. Although we still have those. So today, if we're looking at if we're looking at coming out of those negative things, we're looking at the future that is almost post-racial, right? What is the utility of race then? What is the utility of racial categorizations currently? Is there any utility to it?
Well, no, but that doesn't mean it doesn't persist. There are a lot of things that, persist in, say, American culture that have no practical use, but they persist.
So, in
That's
your
that's actually the systemic part of the problem. What use is a European beauty standard? It is of no use, but it persists.
so how can you flesh that out a bit? How do you mean there is a European beauty standard? Is it something that's imposed? Is it
Well,
something that?
in the U.S., there's a blonde-haired, blue-eyed standard. It comes up in one of John McWhorter's comments. There is a blue-eyed um, Northern European standard, a beauty standard in the U.S. There are skin lighteners in Africa and England and the U.S. There are hair straighteners. That's all European beauty standard.
But that's all individual people making free
No,
choices.
it's a European beauty standard.
I don't understand when you say it's a European beauty standard. Of course, there's going
Okay,
to be a beauty standard. There's
why would a black woman want straight hair?
I don't know. She admires it.
No, it's a European beauty standard. In the U.S. Army and a lot of corporate dress code type rules in the United States. And I don't know the details, but I mean, there were literally and still are dress codes that don't allow, say, braided hair or that sort of thing, or huge kinky afros. Those exist now. There is a European beauty standard, and hair straighteners and skin lighteners are a thing.
Okay, so is there a beauty, say in the workplace, is there sort of a are there laws like in the case of say
No,
the hair?
having a law doesn't negate a systemic problem. Culture culture kind of exists outside of laws.
But isn't it understandable seeing that American society is predominantly European based? Isn't it a given that the dominant culture would be from the dominant, if we want to say, racialized group in a particular place? That their standards would be what would be
I
mainstream. I
don't think
mean,
it's necessarily a
if you have
given.
more than 60% of the people in the US being whites, then they're
Yeah,
culturally dominant.
but
So
absolutely. But the problem is, what if you don't want to be white? What if, yeah, sure, 60% of the population, and there are reasons even for that. But um, if you go against that European standard, what are the repercussions? And bottom line is there are repercussions.
mm. so these racial categories persist even though they are no longer useful, right?
Yeah. But I mean,
And
there's all kinds of things in human nature that aren't useful, but they persist. I mean,
mm,
why circumcision?
and that's a religious and symbolic
Well,
gesture.
no,
So
it I understand, but I'm not going to make that. There are things that are not useful that persist because they're traditional or religious or whatever the reason. There are
mhm,
plenty of behaviors and traditions that continue to exist that hold no practical purpose.
true, true. Okay. So looking at the composition of the US, both Glenn and Greg talked about the Omni American. Now, at a certain point in the conversation, I think Greg was saying that, well, Americans, you are everything. You are European, you are African, you're an Omni American, and I think that even a lot of African Americans have European DNA or
Quite a large
European
percentage,
European
a huge
ancestry.
percentage.
Good. So, in that sense, shouldn't the drive be towards a unique American identity that is not balkanized along racial lines of African Americans, European Americans, but just Americans? Seeing that
Well, um,
this is a mixed pool of people.
oddly enough, um, I think it happens, but it tends to happen outside of the United States. And if you go back, they also bring up um, Richard Wright and James Baldwin when they were in Paris. And I've been, to a couple places outside of the U.S. And you know what? I like, excuse me, when I was in Israel, for instance, I got treated like royalty. They could care less. So I wasn't black, in an American sense in Israel or, any of the places, Spain, Abu Dhabi, any of those places. I was American. And,
Mm,
so, but I think inside America, it's a little bit less, it's a little bit more situational.
mm,
Once I started talking, say in you know in Italy, they knew, oh, you're American. It changed everything a lot of times. Now, I
mm,
never received any sort of problems when I was overseas, and very rarely in the U.S. But yeah, you are American more so when you're overseas, a Yank,
mm,
than you are within the United States. So yeah, you're right. And it should be like that in the US, but it's not.
mm.
But I think it's better than when I was in high school. I mean, it is getting better.
Yeah, so the racial progress is there. These things are getting better. But the narrative mostly from the left is that racial relations have not been better, or they couldn't be worse.
Well, the thing is, if your answer is it could be worse, it could be 1965, is that really much of a response?
No, 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 no. That's not my answer. My response is not it could be 1965. My response is that things have gotten better, and things are getting
Right.
better.
It could be
And the
1965. Things have
no,
gotten better. I don't know that that's a very satisfying answer. I mean, because you're implying,
when
and I don't mean you, let's
I know when
not
I say
you
things,
specifically,
of
but
course,
when
when I
you
say
when you say that, it's
mm,
almost like a Shelby Steele thing. We know that bad things happen in life. We should just ignore an Ahmaud Arbery or George Floyd. But there are people who aren't willing to just kind of go, oh, statistical anomaly, let's move on. There are people who don't feel that way. And I think they're valid because it happens too often. If it happens once a year, it's too often. And not just to black people. Now I'm drifting off on police behavior, so I don't want to get too far into that. But America has a history of it. So yeah, there are people who are just going to go typically American. It's happened so much. And then there are going to be people like Shelby Steele that will just basically say, hey, y'all need to deal with it. It's better. But that's individual choice. I'm not Shelby Steele. If an Ahmaud Arbery happens and that case was egregious, um, that can happen in 2022. I'm not sure I'm so comfortable with just calling it an anomaly. It doesn't happen a lot. Um, that something like that could happen in 2022 is a problem.
of course it's a problem, and I don't think that we'd ever be able to rid ourselves of such problems, right? But the stance, the posturing is not as if um well, this is a problem that we have to deal with. The posturing is that this is a systemic issue, this is a big
It
issue,
is a
this is a big
it
deal.
is a systemic issue if the system allows it. And
So
I
how has the system allowed something like Ahmad Arbery to happen?
Um, well, let me put it to you this way. It would have been ignored or swept under the rug had one of the people who is a convicted murderer now not released a video. Had he been smart enough not to put the video online, they would still be free men. Once that video was put up on Facebook or wherever, um, the video was so disturbing, it wound up putting three men behind bars for life. And the system, the DA has a trial coming up, the district attorney, who kind of like, one of the people who was convicted of murder, one of the McMichaels, he used to work for the district attorney. And it was like, hey, yeah, okay, I'm going to take your word for it, etc. She might do jail time for how negligent she was. So that's systemic. That's a problem.
Is was that systemic, or was that the corruption of a particular individual who was acting in a favorable way towards someone who they knew? Was it there were I
They
think there was
were
some
both.
sort of
They were.
relationship between that particular government official and the McMichaels.
Well, let me
There
ask you a
was a
question.
relationship.
Let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
Were both of them in law enforcement?
No.
The district attorney is literally in law enforcement, and the guy that he was retired, but he was a former attorney. I'm sorry, a former investigator in the district attorney's office. She was an elected official. District attorneys are elected officials. So it's an inherent systemic problem. If someone in authority, and then
If someone in
there
authority,
was
and
a
then there was a
judge
judge, there
involved
was
as
a
well.
judge involved as well.
So yeah,
So yeah,
they were part
they
of the
were part of
system.
the.
Hence my point about a systemic problem.
Okay, so they were part of the government system, so
Yes,
it's a
they were.
systemic problem.
One of
That's
them.
so
One of
that's
them
your
was.
definition. That's your
One.
definition of what it means to be systemic. Anything
One of
that
them was an elected government official, part of the system. Hence a systemic problem.
okay. Okay, welcome to the conversation. So I don't know if you can hear us, or if you'd like to dive right in, or maybe I'll just go next to the next question.
What's up, OGA? You're
Oh,
muted.
yeah, 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 he's muted. Oh, let me unmute.
Let me unmute.
I can hear
I can.
myself. So, okay, maybe he has to come back in. So, Stanley, now talking about John McWhorter brought up something about some well-meaning people talking to him that he has to instill some sort of racial consciousness in his biracial kids. You have a biracial kid, even Oge has a biracial kid. So the question now is, should biracial children should they be encouraged to pick a side, to pick a racial
No,
identity?
nope.
Is it essential to there being an American to, or there being a human being in a multiracial society, to identify with one racial group or the other? So were the concerns
Not
of those people, was it
exactly.
genuine?
John McWhorter tends to be a little bit of an odd bird sometimes. Yes, I have a biracial son. He knows that, he knows my parents. He knows his grandparents. Um, I think a lot of how children learn sometimes is the example of their parents. I didn't buy him a dashiki for Christmas. I didn't buy him kente cloth. However, every now and again, if I run across a good documentary on African slavery in American history, I will either watch it with him or recommend it to him. I think he needs to know his background or at least be familiar with it. But I'm not Huey Newton. I'm not. You know, I'm not that kind of radical. But he should know his history. He should know, his mother's side of the family as well.
Mm.
Um, Now it's odd because kind of something McWhorter said, or actually maybe it was Greg Thomas. I remember years ago he was maybe 5, and I don't remember what the context was, but his response was, "I'm Trevor," and
Mm.
I respect that.
Mm. So he
And,
says
and
he
quite
was Trevor's.
frankly, I mean, I'm kind of the same way. I mean, yeah, I'm black, but
Now, from that statement, he was trying to. It's almost as if he was trying to deracialize himself. Now,
no,
is
it
there?
wasn't. It wasn't. Did someone asking whether he was white or black or anything like that?
Mm.
But maybe it was, are you a mountain man or are you, this, that, or the other? And his identity statement was, "I'm Trevor."
So
Um,
what if someone were to ask him, "Are you white or black?" What do you
well,
think the
to a certain
response would be?
extent, that happened when he was in kindergarten. I think it was one of the kids called him a mulatto. you know, the word, right?
Yeah,
Um,
I do.
and you know what? I can't remember because it's been so long. Um, Maybe he told me, or maybe he told both of us, my wife and I. And you know what? I just kind of chuckled and said, "Well, technically you are," and that was pretty much it. you know, why be offended?
Mm.
Now, it is interesting that a kindergartner knew the word, and
Mm.
I don't think that that kindergartner was like, "What should I call Trevor? Let's look it up in the dictionary." But wasn't the worst thing he's going to be called in his life. So,
So, in that sense, of course, he was called that. He was called a mulatto because he had a white and black parent. Fine. Now, you said something about or from the chart, you said something about people who say they are not black. They are assuming that there is something wrong with being black. Is that
well,
really
I
the
think the
reason?
question, the asking someone, "Are you black?"
Mm.
is actually the problem. And the response, "No, I'm not black." Well, that's
Mm.
kind of problematic too. But to me, again, that's systemic racism. And you get a lot of this in America. And I think you'll have to tell me, I think it's uniquely American. If you're, quote, racially ambiguous, Americans will be the first to ask you, "What are you?
Mm.
What's your background?" And to me, now it may be racial, it may not be racial, but that's a cultural, systemic, like, can't you just, it'll come out, you know, in time. Why do you have to be so forward and go, "Hey, what are you? What's your
But
background?"
I think it derives from the human needs to categorize things, right?
I
And
can agree.
I don't think categorizations are in of themselves are they are bad. Really, it's what you make of such categorizations.
Well, no,
That's
I,
what
I
becomes.
agree with you. I think it's rude. If you know someone long enough, it'll come out eventually.
Yeah. Like in my country, there's this very famous, you know, when people meet for the first time, they will always ask, "Oh, where are you from?" They're trying to find out what part of the country you're from, what tribe you are, what ethnicity, and all that. And nobody ever takes it as a slight, and people just offer it freely. Oh, I'm from so and so place, and if there's a commonality, it's a way to. It's more like a conversation starter, really.
I think
Like, oh, where are you from?
Americans are, we're, you can make the argument that, we're not very mature culturally. There are people, not everyone, there are people who will get offended at that question. There are people that won't. Um, I have kind of a southern accent. So, people will go, well, hey, you're from the South. And, it a lot of it depends on how the question is asked or the style of the question. You know,
So, the people reacting negatively to this question, are they assuming that by asking this question, you are alluding to them not being American or them being an immigrant or something? Is that why it seems offensive?
no, I think a lot of it is just in the delivery.
Mm.
If you're now, maybe, I don't know. I mean, I've seen situations, maybe not experienced them, where I just met this person 10 minutes ago and already he's asking background questions. Let's give it some time.
Maybe he's from the CIA.
Well, the CIA would be subtler, I would think.
Uh, so now another point that was raised in their conversation between Glenn and Greg was that Glenn said, "Why should Black people have to lose their racial identity? I mean, the Jews didn't have to lose their Jewishness. The Irish didn't have to lose their Irishness." But I think to me that Glenn was missing the point in the sense that their cultural identity. It's not as if Greg was saying lose your cultural identity, right? It was saying um, these very block-like kinds of categorization of black, white, that they are not necessary, right? You could still be culturally black, but you know, but saying that, oh, certain things happen because you're black, or that the system is there is a systemically racist or systemically discriminating against you because you're black. That becomes that. I think that was the angle where Greg was coming from, and Glenn was not having it. It was like, no, why
Well,
do I have to lose my racial identity?
I think Glenn, um, I don't think Glenn was necessarily going, I think Glenn was basically talking culture or heritage. I think uh, I don't have a high opinion of Greg Thomas, quite frankly. I think Glenn was
Don't think
right.
you don't think deracialization is a good thing? You
I
don't think
don't
it's the way
think,
to go?
you know what? Um, no, I don't. And
But
and and the reason you brought up the word utility,
yep.
that race genie is already out of the bottle. We need to figure out how to deal with it. And I also put it in my notes. Black people aren't racializing. I mean, this is not a black community problem. This racialization, that's not black people's responsibility to resolve. And remember, you brought up the demographics. 60% white.
Stanley, you there? Can't hear you. So the stream is an open stream. You guys can call in. The link is in the comments. If anyone wants to join the stream, just click the link and come into the conversation.
It's
But
not
Stanley,
It's not Tucker Carlson, Mr. Great Replacement Theory.
Mm. So you're saying that it's not the black people themselves who are doing the racialization, that
No, I'm saying it's
black people
not.
are just they are
I'm saying it's
reacting to.
not the black community's problem to solve. Okay, this whole idea of respectability politics, we have to be excellent and prove that whole Booker T. Washington thing. No, it is a white community problem that they're racist and the culture is racist. We didn't invent it. Racism wasn't imported with the African slaves didn't bring racism to America. So the deracialization, yeah, it's pie in the sky. My question to a Greg Thomas is, why are you stressing over it? Why are the black guys on blogging heads, or black guys, the quote black guys, why is it a topic we should be talking about amongst the black guys?
Exactly. So the black guys are racializing themselves as well.
Well,
Or you hear
you know
statements like
what?
you're not black enough.
You could,
Or how can you say that when you're a black person? Or
okay, you're missing
black.
my point.
Okay.
It's not a black guy's problem. Sure, we can talk about it, but they're not, the black guys aren't racializing themselves.
But they
People,
are.
people like Glenn, people like John, black conservatives are being performative. They're black guys because their paymasters are paying them to be quote black guys. It's their whole
Well,
shtick.
I don't know about that because
They're
I like to
racializing
give.
them. They're racializing themselves for profit.
But when you say they are racializing themselves for profit, they're not the only ones doing it, right? Even
Oh
the
no,
the
well, what
the
does that matter? We're not talking about everybody.
but well, the point is about black people in America. You say they are not the ones racializing themselves, but I say no. I say
Well,
they
they're
racialize
not. Did
themselves
black
just
people
as well.
did black Americans invent the did black Americans sign into law Jim Crow? No.
They didn't sign into law the Jim Crow. They didn't start the categorizations, but they are effectively using the categorizations. Okay, say something like affirmative action. That is a racially based categorization, right? And black people are using it. So in that sense, are
No,
they
they're
not
not.
racializing themselves
No, Charles. White women are benefiting.
from a policy
Yes.
perspective? So let's say
Yes.
from a conceptual policy perspective, right? If it was
Yeah.
implemented the way it was supposed to be implemented, that is racialization. Of course, it was
No,
usurped by
no,
white
no, no,
women,
no,
but
no.
is that no
You know
racialization?
what? You are basically, I don't even understand your argument here. Affirmative action. Um, Black people haven't benefited as much as white women have. So,
I
um,
I get that point. So now
so
the
even
point,
even if it was a bad idea as a palliative, it never worked in the first place. So yeah, get rid of it. It's not helping black people.
but if you were to get rid of it, there would be a pushback from
From whom?
black voices. There will
If,
be pushback
if,
from black
if
voices.
there is a pushback, it's gonna be Karens who who don't have the benefit anymore. But let me put it to you this way. Black people have given up on affirmative action. There's not a whole lot of pushback, if you'll notice. I don't hear a lot of black people complaining that affirmative action is going away. We gave up on that like 30 years ago.
Yeah. So
It
what
never worked. And it was neutralized in 1978 with the Baki case.
now you say this is not a black uh, people problem. Okay, so let's even get to sort of the meat of this conversation. The white elites. Glenn said it's the white elites who needs to be deracialized because they are the ones who are propping up this narrative. They are the ones that
Yes,
are,
that's
you
what I
know,
think he's right.
they are the ones promoting, say, the likes of Ibram X. Kendi. They are the ones promoting, making everything about
Mm,
race.
Um, well, I understand his point, and actually, it is so funny because their show is literally about making things about race. They're the black guys. So really, how are they actually better than Ibram X. Kendi? He's making money off of race, and so are they.
Mm. So I think that the difference between both of them is they are not pathologizing race.
Sure, they are. They've built a whole show off of the pathology, except they're the black guys saying what the white community wants to hear.
How are they
How is
pathologizing
that
race?
not a pathology?
How are they pathologizing race as much as Ibram X. Kendi is?
Easily. He's making money off of it. They're making money off of it. They're making money off of saying Ibram Kendi is a racist.
What if Ibram X. Kendi is a racist?
I don't think he's a racist. They do. If I thought Ibram X. Kendi was a racist, I'd be rich too.
Really?
Yeah. Well, did you hear um, John McWhorter's comment about his daughters being raised in an upper middle class kind of situation? So he's upper middle class.
Of course, is upper middle class.
He's making money off of being John McWhorter.
But the thing is that you're saying he's upper middle class. Does that mean that he cannot relate with the ADOS experience? Right? Is there a particular ADOS experience that is different from John McWhorter's experience? Isn't ADOS experience, it doesn't it span a spectrum? Because this critique
Oh yeah,
usually
it,
comes
it
out,
spans
oh,
the spectrum.
John is is Ivy League, is out of touch and all that, but he's still black. So what is the black experience? Isn't John McWhorter's experience part of the black experience as well? So why
It
should
is.
it be dismissed
It
in on
it
that
is.
regard?
It is. But the one thing, and I know John McWhorter understands this. I'm not worried about that. Um, the black experience, as you alluded to, is a spectrum. It's not all one thing, it's not all another thing. And I think, the experience has certainly expanded, since 1965. You have upper middle class blacks, and quite frankly, even back, in the day. Um, and I don't want to get into it here because I'm not well researched on it, but his point about Jack and Jill, that's a thing in the black community. But even there are complications, when he talks about, I don't think the Jack and Jill experience would be the best thing for his daughters if they want to learn about blackness. That Jack and Jill wouldn't be it. That's
Mm.
that's talented 10th blackness. That's different. And quite frankly, I was in, when I was growing up, uh, I was in tots and teens, which is kind of, I don't know, but it was kind of the same thing. So anyway, I'm getting off the point. Yes, John McWhorter, he's a black man. He's had a black experience. Um, but the black experience is not a monolith. Black people are not a monolith.
So, what is the most compelling black experience? What is most
There is none.
representative? There
There's
is
no
none.
such thing.
So, it means that it's just an American experience. There is no black American experience. There's no white American experience. It's just an American experience.
Well, it can be very well categorized. And go back to something like Roland Fryer. And I think we talked about it a show or two ago.
Mm,
I brought up the point that police brutality is more likely, and we're not talking fatalities,
mm,
police brutality is more likely to happen to black people and black and Hispanic people than white people. You are more likely to be slammed to the ground or, run into a car or just, petty abuse. You're more likely for that to happen. And definitely if you're a young black male.
mm.
Now, Roland Fryer, the black conservative hero,
Yep.
in his data, and to me, that's a problem. If you're more likely to be injured, you're more likely to have a fatal injury. That's just basic, you know, logical conclusion. So
No,
there is no one black American experience, but if you want to put it into data, black people are more likely to have a bad experience in the American culture than white people are. And that's a problem. And if the statistics say so, that means there is a consistency to it.
mm.
And that consistency has been going on for 400 years.
Okay. So, back to the point that you made about racism is a white people's problem, not a black people's problem. What can white people do to ameliorate, to end,
Well,
to put a stop to racism? What can they do?
you know who Aramiose Frimpong is?
Yeah, the
Well,
professor.
his flippant remark, and he's about as flippant as a black man can be. We need better white people. It's not so much the black family structure that's the problem. It's the white family structure that is teaching these white kids their racism.
No, I don't understand. So there are two issues here. One, okay, so the white family structure can be different and can be teaching the children racism. But there are also issues in the black community that have
No,
having
you
a
asked what white people could do better. Let's concentrate on what white people can do better.
of
Let's
course
not do let's not do but black people.
okay. So let them be better white people. Can you explain what it entail for them to be better white people? What are they doing currently that they can
Well,
change?
let's
Or what are
start
they
with
not doing?
putting up let's start with putting up statues of let's start with venerating their Confederate ancestors and complaining about statues coming down, then complaining about CRT. Um, let's not
How does that
let's
how does
not
that
sweep
how does
history.
that how does that impact the day-to-day lives of black people in America? I mean, complaining
Well,
about
the
Confederate
question,
statues.
if I recall, the question is what can white people do better, correct?
Yeah,
Okay, well, I'm trying to answer that question. Do you want to change questions?
no, no, go ahead.
Um, I was saying they can teach American history to their kids or in the schools as American history happened. They can
Hmm.
stop venerating, Confederates who were basically, so into racism that they were willing to build their own country over it. Um, let's start putting American history into perspective. Let's do the opposite of patriotic education and
Mm,
teach American history the way it happened.
mm.
Let's not, patriotic education is only, looking at the highlights. Let's look at the problems as well. You can't fix problems if you're not teaching what the problems are.
Okay, that's a
That's
common
how
sense.
white people can be better,
That's a common sense position to me anyway. Teach the history as it is. That's not
or
something
as
that
it
I,
was.
or as it was, that's not something I want to argue with. So, how much of this change in behavior is going to positively impact the Black communities? Because the Black community talks about the challenges that they are facing, right? The economic challenges. They talk about the opportunity challenges. How is this behavior going to translate into economic opportunities for Black Americans?
Can you ask the question again
Okay,
just to
so
make sure I understand it?
So the question is these things that you just mentioned that white people should start doing to at least to be better, to not be racist. And you said something about not mourning about their Confederate statues coming down, right? Said something
Mhm,
about not mourning about CRT, right? Now, my
mhm.
question is, when they do those things, how much of an impact will that have on the real challenges that Black Americans are facing? Challenges like the economic opportunities, the opportunities for building generational wealth and all that. How much of an impact would these behaviors you just outlined have on those real challenges?
Well, let me ask you a question. I don't think it'll be a direct or immediate impact, but how can having better kids, how can building a better society not benefit Black people? It would benefit white people, it would benefit Americans overall. How is having a better family or a better conception of what America is and has been, how could that not be of benefit to everyone, not just Black people?
Yeah. So I think it can be of benefit, right? But I'm trying to find um the a concrete translation of those change in attitudes and behavior to tangible change or
I
improvement in
don't
the conditions of Black Americans,
I don't think you
right?
can.
Exactly.
I mean,
So if
I think
so
that,
so
well,
so it,
no, that
it
doesn't mean
seems
it
it
shouldn't be
seems
done.
of
And
course of course not. I'm not
here's
I'm
my
not saying it
problem.
shouldn't be done. I'm
Here's
not
my
saying it shouldn't be
problem.
done. Mm,
If everything can't be translated into
mm.
economics, okay,
True,
having better
true,
white people doesn't mean you're going to have a couple more dollars in your paycheck. It
true,
just means
true,
your
true,
life might be better.
true, true. Now, maybe I'm prioritizing economics, right? To me, I think that economic well-being should take precedence over whether a white person acts
And
in a
see,
friendly
I'm
manner
the
towards me.
total, no, I'm the total opposite. I
Okay.
think I think the markets are a tool. I don't think there's something that I read in Professor DeLong's economic history that I talked about earlier, and Carl Poliani, who I'd never heard of, opposite Hayek, who everyone knows who Hayek is. You know,
mm,
Hayek was more like markets are everything. When they say let's privatize schools and school vouchers, that's all Hayekian. There's an opposite point of view, which is man was not made for the market. The markets were made for man. And
mm,
I tend to want to be that way. Markets are a tool, economics are a tool. They may be a means to the end, but they're
mm,
not. Economics is not the end. Economics is not a measure of being a good human being. It's not a measure of, Elon Musk being the richest man in the world at one
mm,
point in time doesn't mean he's a super genius or
mm.
right or a good human being.
True, true. But I am saying that if you're looking at a group of people as a whole, I think that their economic well-being should take precedence over whether someone else likes them or whether someone else treats them nicely, as long
And
as
I
they're
don't.
not.
I don't.
Well, maybe you're seeing it because you are economically secure, so that's not a problem for you. What how,
Well,
how
no,
much
I
of
mean,
what about those Black Americans who are not as economically secure as you? They may think having having financial security is much more important than whether their white neighbor likes them or not,
no,
or
that
whether their
that's
white
a
neighbor rages against CRT.
that's a really good point. There's Boyce Watkins, Dr. Boyce Watkins. There are tons of people out there, who are, black people getting rich is like well, hell, there's a whole prosperity gospel thing in, American, religion, some of it. Um, I understand your point. It's just not a point I agree with. Number one, I think you can do both. Um, I think, in kind of like how I am,
Mm,
um, how much you can't take the money with you. I'd much rather, you know, be worth a billion versus 230 billion. You're still going to
mm,
have a good life.
mm,
So, so, how much? I don't know. I'd much rather be able to read a book on a Sunday afternoon and, kind of hang out with my kids than be off, helicoptered to, somewhere trying to make my next billion. Um,
mm,
it's a quality of life. I don't think economics should necessarily, economics is important, but if it starts becoming why you're missing your kid's birthday party, it is a problem.
mm. True. Okay, true. So my last question before we end the stream. So my last question would be, in a hypothetical situation where racism does actually come to an end in America, what is the place of race in your conception? Do you think that race would or should still exist in a post-racist America?
Well, see, I don't personally, I would agree with Greg Thomas, or, well, maybe not Greg Thomas, but definitely Dr. Mason. Um, Racism's not going to go away. It's kind of human nature. You brought up the need to categorize as a, kind of an instinct. So expecting it to totally disappear is utopia, or utopian. Um, People being rewarded or cheered for it or admired for it, that part should go away.
Mm. All right, that is very cool. So I think this will be a very good place to come to the end of this conversation. Ogie couldn't join us, but it's been a pleasure talking with you, Stanley. As always, we had
Yeah, me
more
too.
we had more than a 3 hour conversation yesterday talking about whether Christianity whether Western civilization was born from Christianity or not. I think we're going to do a live stream about that sometime in the future. But for
I hope
next,
so. I miss talking to Ogie.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So, but for next week, I think we should talk about who gets to set beauty standards. So let's do something like
Oh,
that.
that's a good one.
Yeah. So I'm hoping that everyone here would come to the live stream, and you can call in. It's always an open stream. I really love to talk to people. I want it to be open. Anyone can call in and just share your thoughts and share your views, and we just have fun. We just have a blast. So that being said, if you haven't liked the stream, like, share, subscribe to the channel, and I will see you guys in the next live stream. So it's goodbye for now.
Take it easy, Charles.
Yes, thanks, Stanley.